Sunspot. This underrated mutant is among the strongest entities in the Marvel Universe. The X-Men universe is full of mutants with varying levels of strength and abilities, and Roberto da Costa, aka Sunspot, is one of the strongest entities that has ever been introduced in this franchise. Sunspot was first introduced in the Marvel graphic novel, and he was one of the members of the New Mutants who later worked alongside the X-Men as well as the Avengers. Roberto was initially a young boy with the ability to harness the powers of the sun, and he grew up to become one of the most underrated mutants in the Marvel Universe. Today, we will explore his origins as well as his story arcs and tell you everything there is to know about Sunspot. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means an awful lot. Thank you. Let's begin. A brief backstory of this incredible mutant. Roberto da Costa was introduced when he was just a teenage boy in Rio de Janeiro, where he played soccer for his school team. He first showed signs of being a mutant during a championship match, wherein some boys from the opponent team made racist comments against him and even knocked him to the ground. Roberto then went after one of the players named Keller, who retaliated by beating him. However, Roberto's superhuman abilities soon showed themselves, and his body and clothing even turned black as he assumed a form devoid of light in order to absorb solar energy and use it against his opponent. While Roberto freaked out after experiencing his powers, it caused quite a stir among the spectators and the players, and they all escaped. In the meantime, Roberto's girlfriend, Juliana Sandoval, stood by him and even consoled him as he tried to process everything. On a different side, Roberto's powers caught the eye of Donald Pierce, one of the elite members of the Hellfire Club. Pierce sent his mercenaries to kidnap Roberto, but they failed. In an unfortunate turn of events, they kidnap Juliana instead, while Professor Xavier gets wind of their plans and sends his team to help Roberto. Professor X used his telepathy and found out that Pierce wanted to kill Roberto, so he sent his colleague, Dr. Moira McTaggart, along with two young mutants named Karma and Psyche to help Roberto. In the meantime, Roberto decides to meet with Pierce's men so that they would release Juliana in exchange. However, the mercenaries soon revealed that they had no intentions of letting her go, and that they would kill her along with Roberto. They soon aimed a gun at Roberto, who was still struggling to use his powers. To save Roberto's life, Juliana jumped in front of him and took a bullet for him. She died amid the fight, and Roberto felt distraught and guilty over her death. He then decided to avenge her death and agreed to join Professor X's team of New Mutants. He trained alongside Wolfsbane and Samuel Guthrie, aka Cannonball, under the supervision of Professor X. Roberto sought his revenge on Donald Pierce and eventually tracked him down and defeated him. Sunspot plays a crucial role in X-Men: Days of Future Past. Sunspot was also a part of the super hit X-Men Days of Future Past movie, wherein Aiden Canto played the character. The film was set in a premise wherein Logan, aka Wolverine, traveled back in time to 1972 to tweak the course of history and thereby save the mutants in the future. It began in a distant future in the year 2023 when all the Sentinels were programmed to track down mutants and kill every last one of them. Sentinels were technologically advanced robots designed by Dr. Bolivar Trask to hunt mutants, and they possessed self-awareness as well as the ability to think like humans. After getting rid of almost all the mutants, the Sentinels transformed the future into an apocalyptic wasteland with very few X-Men survivors. They soon get wind of these survivors as well and decide to go after them in Moscow. Sunspot was among the group of survivors, along with other mutants such as Kitty Pryde, Blink, Warpath, Bishop, and a few others. As Warpath and Blink realize that the Sentinels are onto them, they immediately warn the other mutants and prepare to defend themselves. Bishop asks Sunspot for some help in gaining power, and Sunspot immediately uses his abilities to give him some energy in the form of fire. While the Sentinels break into the mutants' base, Sunspot smothers them with flames and tries to catch them off guard. However, they soon realize that defeating the Sentinels is no easy feat since they have the ability to replicate the mutants' powers and use these new newly gained powers against them. While Colossus and Warpath end up dying due to the Sentinels' manipulation of their powers, one of the Sentinels counters Sunspot's attacks by creating a cocoon of ice around itself. Sunspot realizes that his flames are useless in this scenario, and the Sentinel then uses this freezing ice to strangle Sunspot until he dies. In the meantime, Professor X comes up with a plan to use Kitty's powers to send Wolverine to the past to prevent these events from happening. As the movie progresses, Wolverine meets with a younger Professor Xavier in the past and tries to prevent this apocalyptic future from taking place while the mutants battle the Sentinels in the future. In one of these scenes, the surviving X-Men fight in a battle against the Sentinels and prepare in advance while the Sentinels track them down. During this battle, Sunspot fights with Storm, Bishop, Magneto, and Colossus to defend themselves against the Sentinels. While all these mutants suffer injuries and have difficulty standing their ground, one of the Sentinels primarily targets Sunspot. The Sentinel forms a diamond-like skin in order to deflect any damage caused by Sunspot's flames, and then gets close enough to him to cut one of his arms off. Sunspot continues to fight back, but another Sentinel stabs him with its claws and impales him. Some interesting comic book storylines featuring Sunspot. Sunspot was an essential character in the Fallen Angels story arc, wherein he accidentally injured one of his teammates named Sam Guthrie, also known as Cannonball, during a soccer game. While Sam ended up with a concussion, Sunspot decided that he was a danger to the team and ran away. He started living by himself on the streets when he finally ran into a mutant named Chance, who was running away from a group of bullies. Sunspot intervened and saved Chance, but his powers soon stopped working. Chance later abandoned Sunspot and ran away with an alien girl named Ariel, while Sunspot was left alone once again. He eventually came face to face with Warlock, who tried to convince Sunspot to return to the New Mutant team instead of struggling to live alone. However, Sunspot believed that he was unworthy of fighting with the mutants and expressed his desire to live in isolation. Warlock respected his wishes, but still suggested that the two of them should at least stick by each other's side. Sunspot soon decided that he must become a villain and rob a church, but he soon realized that this was not his calling and he could not go through with such a plan. He stayed with Warlock, and they even ran into duplicates of Jamie Madrox and Siren, who were trying to get them to return to the New Mutants. Meanwhile, a cyborg named Gomi approached Sunspot and tried to recruit him to the Fallen Angels team. Fallen Angels was an organization made up of adolescent mutants who had turned to a life of crime and thievery under the eye of the mutant criminal known as the Vanisher. Sunspot agreed to accompany Gomi, and soon learned that some of the other young mutants in this group included the duplicate Madrox, Siren, two cybernetically enhanced lobsters named Bill and Dawn, Chance and Ariel, as well as a mutant named Boom Boom. Vanisher, the leader of the Fallen Angels, then teleported all of the mutants to the Valley of the Flame, which was located in Dinosaur World. They were also joined by Moon Boy and Devil Dinosaur, and this Devil Dinosaur accidentally crushed one of the cybernetically enhanced lobsters named Dawn. Sunspot observed the scene while Gomi addressed the situation and talked about never leaving their friends behind after any accident, and he soon started missing the New Mutants. Sunspot even started questioning his decision to leave them and wondered whether he should return to them. During a mishap caused by Chance, all these mutants temporarily lost their powers. Ariel then suggested that all of the Fallen Angels should just take their leave, and she even offered to teleport them all to her home planet, Coconut Grove. The Fallen Angels then arrived on this planet, but they were soon captured by the planet's evil leader named Unipar. Unipar intended to experiment on the mutants in order to ensure that they keep evolving, and the Fallen Angels teamed up to defeat him and then return to their own homes. Sunspot and Warlock headed back to the New Mutants and arrived just in time for a battle against Cameron Hodge and the anti-mutant organization known as the Right. During this fight, one of the mutants named Doug Ramsey took a bullet that was aimed at Wolfsbane and ended up losing his life. Since Magneto was leading the New Mutants at the time, he was deeply concerned about their lives and ordered them to never use their powers without his permission. Sunspot then spoke against this and stated that they were allowed to use their powers as they pleased, and additionally pointed out that Magneto was not the one who had given them these powers in the first place. Cannonball and Mirage also agreed with Sunspot, and they soon decided to move their team away from Magneto's control. While Magneto respected the New Mutants' decision to leave, he also declared that they would eventually be a part of his army in their war against humans. He further stated that they would find their way and come back to him in the end, and also specifically targeted Sunspot and told him that he would be the first to return to his team. However, Sunspot and the New Mutants were then introduced to the X-Factor, and they soon merged with the X-Terminator. Sunspot's adventures with the X-Force. After his father's death, Sunspot was recruited by Gideon, a mutant businessman who claimed to care for Sunspot and even offered to help him manage his family's fortune. While Sunspot agreed to team up with him, we later learned that Gideon was one of the Externals, who considered themselves immortal. Gideon also had his suspicions about Sunspot's true identity, and he believed that the young mutant was also an External. He lured him into taking a few tests, and many of these tests were harsh experiments that had detrimental effects on Sunspot's well-being. The tests overloaded him and gave him some new abilities, such as shooting concussive blasts made of heat and light. In the meantime, the New Mutants had reformed under the name X-Force, and they came to Sunspot's rescue. After reuniting with his team, Sunspot left Gideon's side, but the villain managed to copy his powers and gave them to a test subject named Rainfire. This test subject then went on to lead a mutant terrorist group named the Mutant Liberation Front, and he shared a lot of features with Sunspot. Rainfire even pretended to be Sunspot in situations where he had to get out of trouble, and he even managed to switch places with Sunspot by using a telepathic link. This caused Sunspot to spiral out of control and lose his memories until the X-Force's leader, Cable, finally helped him restore his usual state. Sunspot later caught the eye of the elite Hellfire Club when the club's Black Queen, Selene, reached out to him. She wanted Sunspot to join their club, and even told him that Gideon was planning more experiments to replicate his powers and create evil entities. Sunspot and the X-Force agreed to join hands with Selene to stop Gideon, but they soon realized that Selene intended to steal these experiments and test information for herself. She also went as far as to offer Sunspot to revive his old girlfriend if he joined her club, and Sunspot reluctantly agreed. However, he soon realized that Selene did not entirely mean to fulfill her promise, and that she only resurrected Juliana's spirit in the body of a coma patient. Sunspot continued to work under Selene while keeping this a secret from his friends, while also heading the Los Angeles branch of the X Corporation. Eventually, Sebastian Shaw from the Hellfire Club approached Sunspot and even offered him a position in his council as the Black Knight. Even though Shaw had evil intentions, he tried to show himself in a good light, and even told Sunspot that he was trying to change things for the better. After Donald Pierce of the Hellfire Club attacked Shaw, Sunspot decided to replace him as the club's Lord Imperial and declared that he would actually use this position to do some good. At the start of the Young X-Men series, we also learn that Sunspot is set to become the new leader of the Brotherhood of Evil Mutants. He worked alongside Cyclops, while other mutants such as Cannonball, Moonstar, and Magma joined him. During a battle with the X-Men, Sunspot suffered grave injuries when Wolf Club tried to kill him, and he finally realized that something was amiss. It was eventually revealed that Donald Pierce had disguised himself as Cyclops, and that he had used an image inducer to take the form of this mutant to stay close to Sunspot. Donald had hoped to kill Sunspot so that he could finally replace him as Lord Imperial, but his plan eventually failed. Sunspot later joined the Avengers. After the X-Men and the Avengers got into a conflict, Captain America stood up for the mutants and admitted that the Avengers should have stepped up and done more to help them instead of watching from the sidelines while the world hated them. In order to make up for this, Captain America invited various mutants to join them, and he formed a new team of Avengers under the leadership of the mutant Havoc. Captain America even invited Sunspot to join the Avengers as a part of their standby team in case the original Avengers were in trouble. During a story arc, Thor, Iron Man, Black Widow, Hulk, and Hawkeye were captured on Mars, and Sunspot was then a part of the Avengers team that rescued them. Sunspot in X-Men Evolution was a nice addition to the series. Sunspot appeared in a few seasons of the X-Men Evolution TV series, wherein his character was voiced by Mikhail Coleman. He was 15 to 17 years old during the tenure of this show, and he appeared as a young African-Brazilian boy who trained alongside other mutants. He usually wore a red shirt and tan pants, and he had quite an athletic and tall frame. Roberto also had curly brown hair and blue eyes that turned black when he used his powers. In this state, Roberto's body assumed a dark form devoid of any light as he continued to absorb solar energy. In this state, one could see his body being surrounded by a field of bright yellow and orange lights that were surrounded by his dark silhouette. While training with the other recruits, Roberto usually wore the standard blue-covered X-Men uniform with yellow gloves and boots. Roberto was driven and focused on his life, and he was also friendly and pleasant to the rest of his teammates. He was especially close with Wolfsbane, and even shared a rivalry with the mutant Berserker. Roberto's powers made him stand out, and he was aware of the fact that he was stronger than most of his teammates. In fact, he even took pride in his powers, and sometimes ended up showing off to his friends. Roberto was an overachiever in some ways, which was a good trait since it inspired him to use his strengths for the betterment of things. Roberto's backstory was quite similar to his comic origins, wherein he was a young boy who first manifested his powers during a soccer game. Additionally, his father, Emmanuel da Costa, was a rich businessman, and his mother, Nina da Costa, was an archaeologist. He came from quite a wealthy family in Brazil, and he even showed a promising future in soccer until his powers started showing themselves. After being shunned by everyone, he accepted Professor Xavier's offer and went to the Xavier Mansion to train alongside the New Mutants. He extensively appeared in the show's second season, and his first appearance was in an episode titled Growing Pains. In this episode, Sunspot trains at the Xavier Institute and starts showing off his powers when he realizes that the other mutants are impressed with him. However, things don't go exactly as planned when he accidentally crashes into Multiple Man and creates multiple copies of him. Throughout the season, Roberto continues to train with the recruits and gets himself in various situations wherein they end up getting in trouble and then have to answer to Professor Xavier. In one such episode, Beast takes over the responsibility of training the New Mutants, and he takes them indoors to play a volleyball game without using any powers. However, Berserker gets hit in the face with the ball, and a fight soon breaks out when he starts accusing Roberto of using his powers to hit the ball so fiercely. Roberto once even went on a retreat along with Iceman, Spike, Shadowcat, and Wolfsbane as they traveled with Beast to visit the Great Redwood Forest in California. Roberto then appeared in a few episodes in the third season, wherein the true identity of the mutant is revealed to the world. While this causes hysteria among the citizens, various police forces go on a widespread hunt to capture the mutants. While the New Mutants struggle to stay hidden, they follow Berserker into his hiding place in the sewers and run into another mutant named Caliban. Roberto and the New Mutants reason with Caliban, and Berserker tells him that they also need a hiding place and that they are mutants just like him. Caliban then assures them that they are safe here, and Roberto and the other mutants stay in hiding with him. Roberto briefly appeared in the show's fourth season, wherein he helped defeat the Four Horsemen of Apocalypse. He will feature in the upcoming X-Men 97 series. While the X-Men animated series was first released around 3 decades ago, Marvel Studios have announced that an upcoming X-Men 97 series will follow the same plot and continue the original X-Men storylines. Some details about this show were recently revealed at San Diego Comic-Con 2022, and it is clear that it will include critical characters such as Rogue, Jean Grey, and Wolverine, as well as other various mutants and antagonists from the original series. While Sunspot was not among the characters that appeared in the original X-Men series, it has been announced that he will be a part of X-Men 97. Sunspot's character was a part of the New Mutants that were created by Chris Claremont, who was also actively involved in developing this upcoming series. Hence, many of the New Mutants are being featured in this series, and we hope that the X-Men 97 will introduce these characters to a new generation of fans. What made Sunspot so powerful? Sunspot had the ability to absorb solar energy and then use it to enhance his physical strength, and he could store large amounts of solar energy in his cells for future use as well. While most humans require energy from food, Sunspot could convert energy from the sun in order to power his body and even enhance his abilities. Sunspot's body was covered in a cloak of darkness since he often drained all the light from his skin. He could also rechannel the solar energy stored in his cells for other purposes, and then use them in a wide range of ways to defeat his opponents. Sunspot has enhanced super strength due to his bodily cells being powered by the sun, and he initially had 25 tons of force. Over time, his strength has increased to 50 tons, and he also gained the ability to access his power without turning into his darkened form. After Gideon conducted experiments on Sunspot to test if he was an external, his body went through several changes that accelerated his mutant gene and gave him the ability to keep evolving over time. This enabled him to keep upgrading his powers and skills over time, and he only kept getting stronger as more time passed. Initially, Sunspot's ability to store solar energy depended on how much he exerted himself, and he struggled to replenish his energy if he depleted all of it very quickly. While this limited his strength and made him vulnerable to attacks, Sunspot's powers were enhanced beyond measure after his exposure to Gideon's experiments. Essentially, Gideon had flooded Sunspot's body with solar radiation and then exceeded his capacity to absorb solar energy by up to 3,000%. Sunspot somehow persisted, survived these brutal experiments, and emerged as a strong entity with no limits to his powers. He also has the ability to fly by propelling himself into the air, and he could even hover mid-air for long periods of time without feeling tired. Sunspot can also project heat in intense waves around him whenever he absorbs solar energy, thereby manipulating the temperatures of his surroundings. He also had the ability to project heat directly onto other people's bodies, which helped him distract his opponents. He can project concussive blasts of dark plasma energy with his hands, which were powerful enough to blast up to 20 tons of force at his peak. Sunspot also had some ability to project light waves and perform photokinesis, but this ability was not prominent in his story arcs. He is also immune to any form of heat or fire, and his mutant metabolism enabled him to use any heat energy around him to his advantage. He could walk through fire without suffering any injuries, and even withstand very hot temperatures without suffering from any health consequences. Though Sunspot's body could withstand most attacks without any harm, his body was not as durable as the other mutants who could even deflect bullets with their suits. Sunspot was also a skilled soccer player and had a bright future in soccer until he joined the New Mutants. He eventually became the CEO of his father's business, DaCosta International, and displayed great leadership and business management skills. Sunspot had also trained under the eye of Professor Xavier, and he was skilled at both armed and unarmed combat. He was also multilingual and could even speak the future language of Viscani. Over a period of time, Sunspot's health took a hit when he was exposed to the Mpox infection, and he then started using a power regulator on his head in order to keep his powers under control. While Sunspot initially had limited control over the capacity of solar energy stored in his body, he eventually evolved into a being with no limitations to his powers or energy sources.
Now we're talking!
Conclusion. To sum it up, Sunspot was a quite unique presence in the X-Men universe, and he most certainly remains one of the most underrated mutants. He has also appeared in various X-Men comics and shows from time to time, and we cannot wait to see him in the upcoming X-Men 97 series. And, as always, if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. This has been Corey Whelan for Marvelous Videos. Have a good one, be safe out there, and thanks for watching.